Hi everyone, my name is Sarah Murray. I'm one of the librarians at Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine. I'm here today to finish reading Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Wrede. It's book 1 of the Enchanted Forest Chronicles, and there are 3 more books after this. We won't be reading them on the channel, but if you're really interested, make sure you check them out and find out more adventures of Cimmerine, Kazul, and all of the other characters in this book. This series is published by Scholastic, who've been kind enough to allow us to read it to you. And so let's hop on and finish up this really exciting book. So the last thing that happened is that Wrede and the wizards were working together to try to make Wrede the new king of the dragons. Cimmerine, Alianora, the Stone Prince, and Morwen had just stopped this plot, but Wrede got very mad and attacked them, and the escort dragons, not quite understanding what had gone on, stopped them but took them all into custody while they waited for a new king to be crowned. You ready? Chapter 15, in which the dragons crown a new king and Cimmerine gets a new job. The walk to the ford of the Whispering Snakes took longer than Cimmerine expected. The trees of the enchanted forest grew close together in many places, forcing the dragons to take a zigzag pattern instead of heading straight up the bank of the river. Wrede, who was in the lead, seemed to be deliberately setting a slow pace. Cimmerine was sure that he was hoping that the second shift of wizards would arrive at the Blackberry clearing before the dragons at the ford had been warned. She had no idea what would happen then, but she doubted that it would be good. The escort dragon was not interested in Cimmerine's worries, however, and he refused to speed things up, so the group ambled on. As they approached the ford at last, they heard cheering ahead of them. Wrede flinched visibly, and Alianora and the Stone Prince were startled out of their quiet conversation. "What's that?" Alianora asked. "Sounds to me as if we have a new king," their escort said with great satisfaction. "That means I can get a lot of you off my hands right away. What a relief. I thought I was going to be stuck with you for hours." Alianora looked faintly indignant at this unflattering opinion. Morwen was merely amused. Wrode's wings sagged momentarily, and then he seemed to pull himself back together, and he continued on as confidently as ever. Cimmerine's concern deepened. What if Wrede managed to convince the new king that they were all lying? They reached the edge of the cheering crowd of dragons. "Who did it?" the escort dragon asked. "Who's the new king?" "How should I know?" the other responded. "I can't see a thing from way out here." "You'll find out soon enough," the dragon said. Then he raised his voice and shouted, "Make way! Coming through! Prisoners for the king! Make way!" The crowd of dragons parted reluctantly, and the escort dragon herded the group forward, still shouting. They made their way through the cheering dragons until they reached the edge of the rivers. "Stand away!" shouted someone in the river. "Stand away for the king!" The nearby dragons drew back, leaving Wrede, the escort dragon, Cimmerine, and her friends standing by themselves on the trampled moss. As the dragons moved away, Cimmerine caught sight of Kazul, lying comfortably beside the river. "Kazul!" Cimmerine cried and ran forward. "Are you all right?" A model dragon standing beside Kazul shifted and flicked his tail angrily at Cimmerine. "You should say, Your Majesty," he said with a warning scowl. "Don't be ridiculous, Frax. She's my princess," Kazul said. "I'm quite all right, Cimmerine. What are you doing here?" "You're the new king of the dragon?" Cimmerine asked in astonishment. But when you left this morning, you could barely fly. How did you get Calling Stone all the way from here to the Vanishing Mountain?" "Calling Stone apparently does more than merely pick out the right king," Kazul said. "The minute I picked it up, I felt fine." "This is impossible," Wrede said. "Are you accusing me of fraud?" Kazul asked mildly. "He better not," Cimmerine said. "He's the one who is cheating with the help of Zemnar and the rest of the wizards." "Really?" Kazul said in tones of great interest. "It's all nonsense," Wrede declared. "The girl's just trying to attract attention." "Really?" Kazul said again, and smiled, displaying all of her silver teeth. "Oh, come now, Kazul. Surely you won't take a mere princess's word over mine." "That depends entirely on what she says. Tell us about it, princess," Kazul commanded. So Cimmerine told them. She brought the stone prince forward to explain what he had overheard the wizards and Wrede discussing in the banquet hall, and she made Alienora tell everyone about melting the wizards with wash water and lemon juice. She told about getting to the fort of the whispering snakes on the first feather and being unable to convince any of the dragons to listen to her. She told about going to Morwen's house to find out where the wizards were and about using the last feather to get to the wizards and melt them. She described Zemnar's unexpected appearance and subsequent melting, and the way that Morwen had broken the wizard's spell, and she finished with an account of Wroeg's futile attack. And then he landed. Cimmerine waved in the direction of the escort dragon, and decided to bring us all back here. And I think someone ought to go back to the clearing where the blackberries are before the next batch of wizards arrives. I don't know what they'll do when they find out what's happened, but... Yes, I see, said Gazul. She turned to a pale green dragon beside her. Take 5 or 6 of the younger dragons, the ones that have been talking about starting a wizard hunt, and go have a look at this blackberry clearing. Yes, your majesty, said the pale dragon with a fierce grin. Surely you don't believe this, Wrede said. Gazul stared at Wrede without saying anything, and the dragons around the edges of the circle rattled their scales. Your majesty, Wrede added hastily. Why should I disbelieve it? Gazul said, still watching Wrede. The whole thing is preposterous, Wrede said. How could wizards do anything to affect Colin Stone? Your majesty. Gazul looked at Cimmerine. I'm sorry, Gazul, Cimmerine said, shaking her head. I know what the wizards were trying to do, but I don't have the slightest idea how they were doing it. I believe I can explain that, your majesty, Morwen said. She stepped forward, tossing and catching the wizard's black rug casually in her hand. They were using this. I believe that you'll find it comes from the caves of Fire and Night. From the King's Cave, in fact, where Colin Stone was found. And one of the properties of the Caves of Fire and Night is that you can use one piece to cast spells which affect similar pieces. Just the way the Impossible Book says, Cimmerine exclaimed. Demont-Morsay? Yes, I suppose he is fairly impossible, Morwen said. Is this sufficiently similar to Colin Stone that the wizards could have used it to affect the stone through it? Gazul asked. Certainly, your majesty, Morwen said. This is... Wrede began. Ridiculous, impossible, and unbelievable, Gazul said. You've said that part already. But I haven't heard you say anything particularly convincing in support of that attitude. Oh, really, your majesty, Wrede said. Next you'll be saying that I poisoned King Tokaz. It doesn't seem likely, Gazul admitted, since Tokaz was poisoned with dragon's bane, and dragons can't get anywhere near the stuff without feeling the effects. What if Zemnar made a dragon's bane-proof packet for him to carry it in? Cimmerine said, thinking of the bag that Aunt Terrell had been carrying when she met him in the valley with Alienora. Something that would melt when he dropped it into the king's coffee. I suppose it's possible, Gazul said. But there's no such evidence that Zemnar did anything. What would it have looked like? Alienora asked suddenly. Would it have been something like a very large tea bag? Everyone turned to look at Alienora. I think that would have worked quite well, Princess, Gazul said. Why do you ask? Because Wrede had something like that with him when he went to see King Tokaz the night before the king was killed, Alienora said. I saw it. An angry muttering rang through the crowd of dragons. Lies, Wrede snarled. They're all lies. Are they? Gazul said coldly. I don't think so. You must have wanted to be king very badly indeed. Wrede darted a glance around the circle of dragons. What he saw did not appear to be reassuring him. No! Consorting with wizards, killing the king, and plotting to cheat at the trials with Colin Stone, Gazul said as if Wrede had not spoken. Hardly proper behavior for a dragon. The crowd murmured in agreement. Cimmerine looked from Wrede to Gazul and back. Wrede appeared to be terrified of something, but Cimmerine could not tell what it was. He crouched and seemed to shrink away from Gazul, drawing his wings in as close as he could and making himself as small as possible. Cimmerine blinked. It was remarkable how much smaller Wrede could make himself look. In fact, he's shrinking, Cimmerine exclaimed. No! Wrede cried again, but it was much too late. He shrank faster and faster, his wings melting into the ridges along his back and his claws retracting. He was barely as tall as Cimmerine's shoulder. Then, with a sudden shiver, he collapsed in on himself, and a small rain of scales pattered to the ground. A moment later, an extremely warty toad with angry red eyes crawled clumsily out of the center of the pile. Is that Warog?" Eleonora asked in a hushed tone. The toad turned and glared at her, and she stepped back a pace. The stone prince put a protective arm around Eleonora's shoulder and glared back at the toad. "Behave, or I'll step on you," he said. "Yes, it's Warog," Kazul said. She sounded almost sad. "That's what happened when a dragon stops acting like a dragon." The toad turned his glare at Kazul's direction and then hopped off and disappeared among the stones along the riverbank. Eleonora shuddered. Kazul studied her for a moment. "You were Warog's princess, weren't you? I'm sorry about this, but it couldn't be helped. It won't take long to find you another dragon." "I don't think you'll have to worry about finding her another dragon," Cimorine said. She had been watching Eleonora and the Stone Prince, and an idea had occurred to her. "What? Why not?" asked Kazul. "Because the Stone Prince fought with Warog, and Warog certainly didn't win. Doesn't that mean that he gets to rescue Warog's princess?" I'm not sure that the rules cover this situation at all," Kazul said, "but it sounds reasonable enough, and under the circumstances, I doubt anyone would object. Unless, of course, she does." "Oh," said Eleonora, and she blushed a rosy red. "No, I don't object at all." "Are you sure?" the Stone Prince said anxiously. "You don't mind waiting a while to marry me? I mean, if you're willing to marry me. You needn't, you know, if the idea doesn't appeal much." "It appeals to me very much," Eleonora said, blushing redder than ever. "But why do you say that we have to wait?" The Stone Prince sighed. "I still have to find a king and do a great service, and that's bound to take a while." "For a young man as intelligent as you seem to be, you're remarkably foolish," Morwen commented. "What on earth do you think you've just done?" An expression of astonishment spread across the prince's face. "You mean the king I was supposed to serve is the king of dragons?" "Exactly," Morwen said, "and I doubt that you could do her a greater service than saving the throne from Warog's plotting." "That's settled then," Kazul said. "Let's get the rest of the ceremonies finished and get back to the mountains. There's a great deal of work to be done." The dragons all bowed, and the eddies of movement began in various sections of the crowd. Shortly, 2 dragons came forward carrying Colin's stone. It looked like a long black log, about 3 times as thick as Cimorine's waist, and twice as tall as she was. The dragons laid it in front of Kazul and backed away. Another dragon appeared holding a large circlet made of iron with 6 spikes pointing upward at intervals around the rim. Kazul set her front feet on the black stone, and the dragon set the circlet on her head. The crowd of dragons began cheering again, and after a few minutes they began to form a line to congratulate their new king and present their coronation gifts. Other dragons set up large tubs of wine and platters of meat and cheese, which were quickly surrounded. In the middle of the presentations, the dragons Kazul had sent off to the blackberry clearing returned, and Kazul took a short break from accepting congratulations to hear what they had to say. "The wizards showed up before we'd been there 10 minutes, Your Majesty," said the pale green dragon who was the leader of the group. 6 of them, just like your princess said." "They weren't happy to see us," the youngest dragon said smugly. "I would think not," Kazul said with a smile. "What did you do with them?" "We chased 5 of them away," the pale dragon reported. "I don't think they'll be back either." 5? The pale dragon shot a glance at the youngest of the group, who licked his lips and looked even more smug than before, and said nothing. "Yes, Your Majesty." "I see. Well, that's more than enough to confirm what Cimorine told us," Kazul commented. She raised her voice. "The arrangement between the dragons and the Society of Wizards is hereby cancelled. From now on, dragons will not be allowed anywhere near the Caves of Fire and Night, no matter what they say." And then she went on accepting presents and congratulations from her new subjects. Cimorine watched the festivals with mixed feelings. She was very glad that Kazul was the new king of the dragons, but she couldn't help about wondering what effect Kazul's coronation would have on her own position. The king of the dragons certainly wouldn't need a princess as a mark of status. And there would be plenty of younger dragons eager to cook and clean for their king, as if only a way to get a start in the court. A preoccupation stayed with her for the rest of the day, through the entire coronation picnic and the flight back to the Mountains of Mourning. Cimmerian and Alienora rode on the back of a very large dragon whose scales were such dark green that they looked almost black. Alienora would have preferred to ride with the Stone Prince, but none of the dragons were willing to take on a second passenger if the Stone Prince was the first. All of the dragons paid their respect to Kazul at the coronation, so the cave was empty when the dragon dropped Cimmerian off. When Cimmerian said goodbye to Alienora, she promised to come over and help her pack the following morning. Then she went in and waited for Kazul to come home. Kazul did not arrive until very late. She was still wearing the iron crown, and she looked very tired. "Thank goodness it's over," she said, taking the crown off and throwing it across the cave. It hit the wall and bounced off with a harsh clang. "You shouldn't treat your crown like that, Your Majesty," Cimmerian said, retrieving the iron circlet. "Of course I should," Kazul said. "It's expected. That's why we made it out of iron instead of something soft and bendable. And don't start calling me Your Majesty. I've had enough of that for one day." Cimmerian began to feel a little bit better. "What happens next?" "Tomorrow we start moving," Kazul said, and sighed. "It will probably take weeks. It's too bad that there's no way of warning a new king in time to pack everything up before the work starts." "Everything?" Cimmerian said in tones of dismay. "Even the library and the treasure vaults? But I've only just got them organized." "Everything," Kazul said. "And if you think straightening out things here was difficult, wait till you see the mess that the official vaults are in." "Oh dear," said Cimmerian. "Is it very bad?" Kazul nodded. "I've just come from looking at it. You'll see it yourself tomorrow. There's a smallish cave next to the library that I think will do nicely for you, but I'd like you to look at it before we start hauling things around." "You mean you want me to stay?" Cimmerian blurted. "I thought the King of Dragons didn't need a princess." "Don't be ridiculous," Kazul said. "How am I supposed to get my Cherries Jubilee if you don't stay? And you haven't even started cataloging the library. And how else am I going to get the King's treasure vault arranged so that I can find things? I'm not going to have time to do it." "Won't the rest of the dragons object?" Kazul snorted. "I'm the king. One of the advantages of being king is that nobody objects to whims like keeping a princess when you're not supposed to need one. And if it bothers you, we'll give you a different title. King's cook and librarian, maybe. Stop worrying and go to sleep. Tomorrow is going to be a very busy day for both of us." Cimmerian smiled and went off to her rooms with a light heart. She slept soundly and was up early the next morning. Kazul was already awake and supervising 3 of the younger dragons who were packing up the treasure in the library. Since Cimmerian was pressed into service at once, it was several hours before she could get away to keep her promise to Alienora. "I'm sorry I'm late," Cimmerian apologized when she arrived at Warlock's cave at last, but it didn't occur to me that Kazul would be moving too, and she wanted me to help. "That's all right," Alienora assured her. "It wasn't as big of a job as I expected, and the prince helped. I'm almost finished." She gestured at an almost full suitcase lying open on the floor. On the other side of the room, the Stone Prince was stacking the empty drawers from Alienora's bureau. "Well, at least I got here in time to say goodbye," Cimmerian said. "You're staying with the dragons, then?" the Stone Prince asked, straightening with a frown. "Are you sure you want to do that?" "Of course she's sure," Alienora said. "Kazul's going to need her more than she did before, and Cimmerian wouldn't be happy in a normal kingdom." "How do you know that?" Cimmerian asked, staring at Alienora. "It's obvious. Linderwall is about as normal of a kingdom as you can get. If you ran away from there, you certainly wouldn't be happy anywhere like it." "I didn't mean that part," Cimmerian said, reddening slightly. "I meant about Kazul wanting me to stay." "That was obvious, too," Alienora said. "You're the only one who was worried about it." She studied Cimmerian for a minute and shook her head. "I wouldn't like being princess for the King of Dragons, but it will suit you down to the ground." "I think it will," Cimmerian said, smiling. "Then maybe you can tell me something," the Stone Prince asked. "What's being done about the wizards?" "They've been banned from the Mountains of Mourning, and there are 100 or so dragons out checking to make sure that they've gone," Cimmerian replied. "They haven't had much luck, I'm afraid. Most of the wizards left after the first few got eaten." "That's all?" asked the prince. "What else can the dragons do? The wizards didn't actually poison King Tokaz. Warwick did that. So there's no justification for an all-out attack on the headquarters of the Society of Wizards, even if all the dragons agree that they want to do it, which they don't." "I suppose you're right," the prince said, "but you'd better tell Kazul to keep a close eye on them. Those wizards will make more trouble just as soon as they figure out a way to do it." I don't know about that, Simmarine said. I think Zemnar was behind most of it, and you melted him. That's it, Eleonora said, and snapped her finger. I almost forgot to tell you. Morwen and I talked for a long time, and she said that melting a wizard isn't permanent. You mean they'll all come back? Simmarine asked. Eleonora nodded. It will take them a while, though, and Morwen said for you to come and visit soon. She thinks that in a few days she'll have figured out a way of melting wizards without dumping soapy water all over them. A method that's a little less sloppy, I think was the way that she put it. That will be useful if the wizards start making trouble again, Simmarine said thoughtfully. Is this everything, Eleonora? The Stone Prince asked, gesturing at the suitcase. Yes, I think so. Eleonora pulled the top of the suitcase over, and the Stone Prince set one foot very gently in the middle of it and pushed until the latch clicked. Where are you going first? Simmarine asked. His kingdom or yours? Neither, Simmarine said, smiling. We're going back to Morwen's. She said that she could change him back from the stone to normal. We asked Kazul last night if we could go out through the caves of fire at night, and she said yes, so... I don't know, Eleonora, the Stone Prince said. I'm beginning to get used to myself this way, and there are certain advantages. There are certain disadvantages, too, Eleonora said, blushing slightly. Simmarine began to giggle. Eleonora's blush deepened. I mean, how are you going to get rid of that chip in your sleeve if you can't change clothes? I think I see what you're getting at, the Stone Prince replied, eyeing Eleonora meditatively. And you're quite right, there's no comparison. We had better see Morwen as quickly as possible. Eleonora and Simmarine looked at each other and burst into giggles. The Stone Prince blinked at them. It's not funny, he said indignantly, which only made them laugh harder. Shaking his head, he waited for them to stop and then picked up Eleonora's suitcase. Shall we go? Simmarine walked with them to the iron gate that led into the caves of fire and night. A purplish dragon was waiting to guide them through the caves. Kazul was taking no chances on Eleonora and the Stone Prince getting lost. Simmarine hugged them both and wished them a safe journey. I hope you both live happily ever. And I hope you do too, Eleonora called back as she and the Stone Prince followed the dragon through the gate. Simmarine watched until they were out of sight and then started back towards Kazul's cave. She thought about Morwen and the wizard melting spell, and about Zemnar and Antarel and the other wizards who would somehow be back soon. She thought about Kazul and about straightening out the treasure vaults that belonged to the King of Dragons, and about the hundreds of books in the King's library, and all of the problems that the King of the Dragons would have to deal with. She thought about Eleonora's last words and smiled. Happily ever after? Simmarine wasn't so sure about that, although she certainly was hoping to enjoy herself. She was positive, however, that life with the dragons would be interesting and busy, and in Simmarine's opinion that would go a long way towards making her happy. Happily ever after? I don't think it's quite what you meant, Eleonora, Simmarine muttered to the empty tunnel. But one way or another, I rather think that I will. And that's the end of this book. Once again, this was Dealing with Dragons by Patricia C. Wrede, the first book in the Enchanted Forest Chronicles, and published by Scholastic, who let us read it to you. We'll have some more interesting stories that will be up next week, so keep checking in on the channel. Thank you so much for listening today. Once again, my name is Sarah Amari. I'm one of the librarians at the Portland Public Library in Portland, Maine, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye!